Yes, ladies and gentlemen, we're back. We're back, and this is going to be a fantastic show. I can feel it. I can absolutely feed it, feel it. So let me start by saying everything is timing, and it's talk time with Tunde. Today's edition is entitled "Am I My Brother's Keeper?" and Are Men Suffering in Silence? This is a subject which it isn't something that just comes and goes. It's a subject that is literally going to be with us for a very long time. And I think the onus is on us to bring light to the situation where there is darkness, because many men are suffering in silence. And we have, at least according to figures in 2017, um, that of all suicides in the UK, 75% were men. And so there is a definite problem or issue that we should all address, because at some point, whether you're the one that's going to be affected, it may be you, it may be someone close to you. We have to shed light on the situation whereby we can help one another as men and support one another. And men have to be strong enough to talk. Before I go on, I have a very special guest with us this evening. A young man that after I watched him on a TEDx interview, because when you hit the TEDx stage, it's not a joke. Where you don't, it's not any and everyone that can just roll up to TEDx and talk. But this young man, once I heard what he had to say, I was very moved and motivated and inspired by the story he had to present, or a story that he did present to the audience. So without further ado, let me introduce to The Fight Is Right, not The Fight Is Right. Talk time is with Tunde. You see what I'm saying? I'm thinking it's The Fight Is Right because I'm so used to the boxing, I'm all entitling it wrong. But I gotta give me, your people gotta be patient with me. The people gotta be patient with me. It's called Talk Time with Tunde. It's not The Fight Is Right. But ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce you a young man who we all need to hear from. We all need to take advice from, because I think that he is actually, culturally, we like to keep it global and universally, but culturally, I've not actually seen a spokesman from our particular community and talk about it. Because, within the Black culture, and I think any culture, because we're seeing the numbers. The numbers are not directed at one race of people. It's men are men, whether they're Black, white, Asian, or otherwise. It's a young man that I've just not seen it, and I think that he actually could be one of the leading advocates for mental health in this country. I would go as far as saying that. So I'm gonna stop rabbiting. And let me introduce you, ladies and gentlemen, the one, the only, Mr. TEDx himself. You see, I'm giving you names, bro. Mr. TEDx himself, Sean Flores.
Yes, brother. Thank you so much, man. You gave me a very powerful entry. You rolled out the red carpet for me. I'm honored. I'm grateful to be here to be able to have a conversation with you on such a pertinent topic in society. And a lot of what I try to do is to speak about the story that I've got, but most importantly to present people with some sort of tangible change. I think a lot of the time we talk about mental health, we have conversations about it, and I think awareness is the first step, but I think ultimately we need solutions. And a lot of what I try to really provide are tangible solutions that young men can access and really speak to. So I'm just grateful to be here. And your passion, the work you're doing it shows me a lot about who you are. So I'd be foolish to not come on and speak to your audience and yourself.
Thank you very much. Well, I mean, I just, man, I mean, there's so much what I'm gonna go into, but I basically want you to give us a talk time with Tunde TEDx special and explain the story, because the story is so moving and motivating. And I said, speaking to you, offline on the phone, I was like, Sean, please come out. Let's just, there's no script here. I just want you to free flow the way you did on TEDx, but for our platform and for our listeners and subscribers. So go ahead, tell us your story, brother.
Yeah, funnily enough, for the first TEDx talk that I did, where I spoke about the failures of the education system and how we're leaving behind a lot of young black individuals in society, I actually had stage fright. I completely forgot everything I wanted to say, so I actually had to completely improvise the entire talk. The second one, I was a lot more planned for, and so my second talk was on the straitjacket of masculinity and male mental health, which is something that has been quite important in my own life. So going through a little bit of my story, for the last 5 to 6 years, I was suffering really and truly with obsessive, intrusive thoughts about my sexuality, thoughts about harming other people and harming myself. And then it reached a breaking point of suicide. But before I go there, I'll start again from the beginning. And what happened was, I had this health anxiety, and this health anxiety manifested through this obsessive fear that I always had chlamydia, or this obsessive fear that I had HIV. No matter what anybody told me, I couldn't get rid of this obsessive fear and anxiety. I would cancel all my work plans, cancel everything I had. I had to go to the clinic to get checked out. When the results would come, I'd stare at the results and I'd be a bit like, nah. There must be something wrong. I was always trying to find reasons to prove there was something wrong. I didn't know that was anxiety at the time. I thought the way I was acting was just normal. I thought I was a responsible human being who didn't want to catch any sort of STIs. But what I didn't realize was it was obsessive. And at the clinic, the doctors, the nurses would ask me, why do I keep coming back? And I didn't have an answer. I said to them, I don't really know. And what happened after that was, at my worst, I paid £300 for a same-day sexual health test just to prove I didn't have anything. And that's, for me, was the breaking point. I was like, I can't do this anymore. I can't afford it, first of all. But secondly, this is not normal behavior. So I almost caught myself. That fear migrated onto HIV, and I constantly got my bloods taken. And after a while, that one left as well. But then what happened, where the obsessive, intrusive thoughts about my sexuality began, was I had a dream. And in this dream, I just saw the back of a white guy. But I woke up 100% convinced I was gay. Nobody could tell me anything different. I believed 100% this was my new identity. And I threw up in the toilet. I remember I went around looking for evidence to prove I was gay. I would speak to my gay friends, being a bit like, bro, how did you know you were gay? Are you sure that I'm not gay? And my friends would be like, you're not gay, Sean. Like, they had their reasons as to why, and I believed it to some sort of degree, but there was something in my head that almost couldn't let me believe it. This was anxiety. Anywhere I went, I was looking for evidence. If I went to MMA, if I went to jiu-jitsu, I'd be worried if I was rolling around with some of the guys. Do I like them? Do I like them? Do I like this? Do I like that? And to a lot of people listening, it sounds obsessive. And yes, it is obsessive. It's rumination. It's anxiety. You're constantly trying to search. And anyone knows that overthinking does not get you any closer to any sort of solutions. That's the one thing to really remember with anxiety. Then after that, when I was with one of my female friends at the time, it was a girl that I was seeing, just the word rape popped into my head. And it's a very sensitive topic, but I'm at a place now in my life where I can speak about it. But when that word popped into my head, I remember I pushed her off me and I just started having a breakdown. I said to her, I'm convinced I'm going to do something to you, and I don't know why. Because to me, I thought having the word in my head meant that that was what I was going to do. Because I grew up quite conservatively religious, and there's a great saying in Proverbs that says, as so a man thinketh, so is he. And I had this idea that if I had something in my brain, it meant that was what I was going to do. But what people don't realize about the brain is the brain creates fantastical stories all the time. Your brain is a machine, it's a storytelling machine. You cannot believe everything that happens in your brain. Your brain literally is hardwired evolutionarily to seek fault with the world. That is why it's so hard for us to fall into a default negative mode. But that's besides the point. I'll go into that a little bit more later. So then at that time, I remember I kept asking, I was like, are you sure I haven't done anything to you? Are you sure I haven't done anything to you? She said, no, Sean, you haven't done anything to me. But I couldn't believe it. I screamed at her to leave. I tried to go to sleep, and then images of suicide and murder popped into my head. And again, big mental breakdown. So what happened as a result of that was I called the mental health team, and I was convinced I must have been hearing voices. I wasn't hearing voices. I just didn't realize the voice in my head was anxiety. It was my own voice. And it was just terrifying for me at the time. So I said to the mental health team, I'm going to be okay. I'm going to find a psychodynamic therapist. Psychodynamic therapy gets to the root of the thoughts. Because I live with OCD, I had my diagnosis of OCD. What you realize with it is with OCD, the thoughts are known as ego dystonic, which means they're thoughts against your morals and values.
For some of the
Oh,
listeners that may not be familiar with the term OCD, can you just quickly say what that is, please?
so OCD stands for obsessive compulsive disorder, which is characterized via obsessions, which are thoughts, and compulsions, which are behaviors. And what you typically try to do is you get the thought, and then what you try to do is you get the behavior to alleviate the anxiety from the thought. But the OCD cycle keeps getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And as time goes on, your world gets smaller. And this is what was happening to me. And I never knew this at the time. So when that happened, I remember I'd call up some of my friends who have actually suffered with mental health. One of my friends, he's actually schizophrenic. And I said to him, how do you know when you're hearing voices? And he told me his voice in his head was like Professor X in Professor X in X-Men. You know, with Cerebral, when he puts on the helmet and he talks to all
Yeah,
the
yeah.
mutants. That's how he said it was for him. But again, I couldn't get this idea out of my head that I must be hearing voices. For this inner narrative to be screaming at me, I thought it must have been voices. So then what happened after that was I was going through therapy, but psychodynamic therapy made me feel worse. And as I said, the key to remember with psychodynamic therapy is they try to get to the root of the thoughts. With OCD, it is ego dystonic, against your morals and values, whereas thoughts that are ego syntonic align with your morals and values. They speak of who you are. Now, what happened as a result was when I was out with one of my friends, I had another really big breakdown. And this was the final point for me. I couldn't take it anymore. I had an image of suicide pop into my head, and I just I was on fire with anxiety, got into an Uber. I was super depressed. I called all my friends. I looked at them dead in the eye and I said to them, I don't want to be alive anymore. I said, I want to be dead. And my friends were crying. They looked at me dead in my eyes because I was usually the friend that they came to support that they came to when they needed support. I was the strong friend. I was the friend that they always asked for advice. So I knew when they saw me in that state, they did not know what to do. And over the next couple of days, I became super depressed. I could barely eat. I could barely sleep. I became quite insomnia. I became full of insomnia. And it was on Saturday, the 4th of June last year. I just said, I can't do this anymore. I went on the internet, and thanks to the Instagram algorithm, I don't know how it happened, but I found this woman called Emma Garrick, otherwise known as the Anxiety Whisperer, and she saved my life. There's no other way for me to put it. And it's no exaggeration. I begged her for a phone call. She picked up the phone, and I just cried my absolute eyes out. I said to her, am I a bad person? Why am I having gay thoughts, rape thoughts, and suicide thoughts? I said, am I going to do it? What's wrong with me? Why is this here? And she explained to me I have OCD. And I said, how do you know? Because she has OCD herself. She has a lived experience of it, and she's a therapist now helping people. And we begun therapy on that Monday, and I've been on the road to recovery ever since. So a lot of my journey is now turning the pain that I went through and repurposing it into something to give back to other people. And I just realized how much Black men, first of all, don't speak about their mental health. And when I first shared my article for the Book of Man about OCD, I had so many Black people reach out to me, Black men, Black women, who spoke to me and told me they had OCD and they had other mental illnesses. I actually, even recently, before I came on this call, I had a message from a young Black lady who spoke to me about she just came out of a psychotic episode and she wants to get some advice from me. So It's been a real journey to where I am now. And most of all, I'm grateful for life because I contemplated ways to take my life. I considered, do I buy a gun? Do I cut myself? Do I jump off a bridge? Do I take pills? Do I put books in my bag and jump off the bridge? I remember when I said to myself one night, if I don't sleep, I'll kill myself. And I fell asleep eventually. And I woke up in the morning crying my eyes out, thinking, why was I thinking like that? I wrote suicide notes. I was prepared to take my life. And I say this in the most candid way possible that sometimes our temporary feelings can cause us to make permanent decisions. And suicide doesn't stop the pain, it only moves it. And I'm just happy to be alive here I am today and hope other people can really speak about their mental health story.
Moving. Um, let me just say, I mean, I've listened to you intently, and I really have to take my hat off to you because I was talking about this earlier on today, and I said it on on at the top of the show that I think that men traditionally. I remember listening to your lecture and you speaking about. I wrote it down. Um, a particular lady. I think it was Judith Stilton.
Mm-hmm.
Um, a book she wrote. How boys and girls receive different messages,
Mm-hmm.
profoundly impacting the way they grieve.
Absolutely.
Um, can you touch on that a little bit?
Yeah. So, from my personal experience, my father died on Christmas Day when I was 6 years old. And it had a profound effect in my life, a massive sense of trauma. When my dad died, my mum lost half of herself. That was her everything, and he was my everything. Everybody spoke to me about how good my dad was as a person. And I admired my dad a lot. And I think even something that a lot of young black boys don't talk about is when we lose our fathers, it means a lot to us. Growing up with a single mother, my mum did as best as she could, but she was not my dad. And I think this is the case for a lot of us. We teach young boys fundamentally that mothers are irreplaceable and fathers are replaceable. And that's not right. It's not
Come
right
on,
to treat men
repeat
as
that
if they're
again. Repeat
disposable.
that one. Repeat that again, please.
we
Because
teach
people on it.
we teach young boys and young girls that mothers are irreplaceable and fathers are replaceable, and it's wrong. We need to teach men that their place in the world is needed, it is strong, and it's most importantly leaves makes the world a better place. And yeah, but let me not go off topic. But what I realized from growing up, for me, I had to grow up very quickly. I watched my mum go through 6 months of severe depression. She left her shoes on top of the car. She left her keys on top in the door. She had really bad panic attacks, but my mum survived, and she even admits it. She survived. And growing up, I never realized just how much I missed my father until I got older, and I realized that the way I was taught to grieve, I wasn't even really taught to grieve. I was taught that I got to suck it up. I've got to move forward, that
Yes.
death happens to everybody. It's a part of life. And yes, death is a part of life. But fundamentally, all these things massively affect the way that we are. And a lot of boys on the street ultimately have PTSD. And I don't say this as an exaggeration, but if you think about it like this, a lot of boys have seen their friends being stabbed, murdered. They're in lives that bring about a certain sense of fear and warrant and a sense of anxiety, but they manifest it differently and they show it differently. Now, imagine a brother on the street can look at you and screw you and he barely knows you. That tells you something about his mindset and who he is. And I think the way that we're taught to grieve as young boys is just to suck it up. You got to handle it. Your pain will make you stronger. Yes, it does make you stronger, but we don't give people the chance to feel what they necessarily need to feel. And when men do grieve, often they're laughed at. They're not taken seriously. We've always got to be the strong ones for the family. And I think there's some women that obviously have to be like that as well. So I don't want to speak too much in one sense of the word. But from my experience, this is something I've noticed, and the research shows this. And when we look at young black boys, especially, we are 6 times more likely to come into contact with mental health services via the criminal justice route. So we have to get in touch with the police and criminal justice to be able to get the help that we need. And young black boys are 4 times more likely to be diagnosed with a psychotic disorder. There is something fundamentally and profoundly wrong with our society, where we dehumanize young black boys to the point that our behaviors are essentially destructive to society. And there's an African proverb that says, a child who is not embraced by its village will burn it down to feel its warmth. And I think a lot of these boys out there are trying to destroy their environments to feel something, to feel a sense of belonging, a sense of identity, and a sense of, most importantly, who they are and where they belong in this world. And I think grief, the way we process grief, shows us that quite often the most.
Dr. Gyal, thank you for your £2. She says, powerful message, Sean. Thank you for sharing. And this is my point. You know, there are many men today who are going through things, Sean. And I think it just speaks volumes of who you are. I mean, you said the same about me, but it actually speaks volumes that are, you know, a young man putting color aside, but it is definitely, this is what I'm trying to say. I've not seen no one from our community speak about this so openly and so and articulate themselves in the way you have. And so I have to really take my hat off to you for doing that. Lance Noy says, say that African proverb again. I had to rewind it. Say it again, brother.
A child who does not feel a child who is not embraced by the village will burn it down to feel its warmth. So it's the idea of a child who's not loved by the village will eventually burn it down physically to feel its warmth.
Manny,
So it's the
play
emotional
this.
warmth, the mental
Sorry.
warmth.
Manny's the man behind the cam today. For those of you that don't know Manny, he is not the new man behind the cam, but now, you know, we're expanding so Gary can work on other parts of production. And so the team is growing. We're elevating here on this channel. And Manny's running in tonight. See, Dr. Gal, you talk too soon. It's Manny tonight. But anyway, Manny, play the piece we have there, please.
Now, the picture on the left, I was asked by a photographer to think about my father, and obviously tears come to my eyes whenever I think about him. And on the right is another picture I took for another shoot. There's a contrast for a deliberate reason to show that there's always two sides to most men, but people forget that. The need to be strong, to not show anyone what you're going through. We only typically see one side, when at home, a lot of men are suffering.
There you go. And again, these are points, you know, that I was again speaking about today, Sean. We live in this social media world, and people are often misled into believing what they're actually watching and sometimes seeing is actually real life. There are always two sides. And so when we're getting into this idolizing these stars and, you know, these people that we're seeing constantly in our face, or they're posting all these pretty looking pictures of themselves, oft times there is a other side.
Absolutely. Humans operate in a duality. And I think quite often men are not allowed to operate within that duality. Now there's wider consequences and wider ramifications in society as a result of that. Whether it's, you want to argue it's the patriarchy, whether you want to argue it's the rise of single motherhood, or men no longer knowing their place in the world as a result of political and social movements. But a lot of men I know suffer a lot, and they do not want to burden the world with their problems because we are taught to suck it up and to keep going. That's what makes a man a man. But suicide is the biggest killer of men under the age of 35. And that tells you something, that when it takes a man to the brink of taking his own life, what more can we do to prevent that? And this is why the more men that I speak to, and the more people I speak to in general with mental health and so much more, mental health has become a trend in some ways, and I'm tired of it becoming a trend, and how anxiety and depression are the acceptable mental health topics to speak about. We need to delve deeper into the reasons as to why men don't speak about mental health. And we have some reasons, you know, a lot of what happens in society is, you know, and I'm going to give you a classic example. Once upon a time ago, men provided for the world, whether that was in the right ways or the wrong ways, we can argue that on another day. but men took care of the family, right? And we had a strong background. We know the family is the key to any society. And Malcolm X said it the best himself, that a mother is the foundation to any great society.
Come
Now,
on.
what slavery and what colonization did ultimately was it destroyed the father at the home of the family. Now, whether or not you want to agree with that or not, you're allowed to disagree with me, but just look at history, and history gives us a great example of the foundation of any great civilization and a strong family unit was the family. The family is the greatest safety net against the government and against certain values and morals you will not agree with. And that's why there's a saying, charity begins at home. Now, when we looked at the breakdown of the family and we looked at the ascent of single motherhood, we looked at the ascent of the benefit system. It was the removal of the need for the man in society, which ultimately destroyed a lot of young boys' lives, a lot of children's lives in general, but also destroyed men's relationships with women. And when you look at now, women can earn their own money. Women are getting, educated at a higher degree than ever before, but men are bailing out of universities. They no longer want to be in certain professions. There's a swing on the totem pole, and we haven't found that middle ground yet. But men no longer ultimately know their place in society, because as I said in my TED talk, that men, we are taught our value comes from what we provide to the world. We are taught what we give to this world is what ultimately makes us valuable. Whereas a woman is born with inherent value. That's from being beautiful, the ability to have kids and so much more. But I think we have to give men ultimately a different message now, because their
Yes.
place in the world is no longer the same. And all of these different things really play into why men are no longer knowing their place. And especially when it comes to black men, we just know how much we're deeply affected, whether it's by society, there's racism, discrimination, stigma, so many different things as well. It's massive. Yeah, it's massive.
I mean, we have a few people online. A lot of people are gonna be listening to this talk afterwards. But I've got some questions. Do you have any advice for our listeners about ways to open up conversations with friends or loved ones about mental health issues?
Yeah, this is a fantastic question. And I'm training at the moment to be a life coach. And some of the advice I often give to people is the way we communicate with some people would be, I think a lot of people, we often like to meet people in the places where we want to meet them. So let's say, Tunde, you and I are good friends, right? And I'm sure we're going to go on to be good friends. But let's
Yes, sir.
say I want to speak to you in a restaurant. You may or may not open up to me. But I think if I ask you, Tunde, what would you like to do? Let's say you want to go to a boxing match or you want to go to a training. If I meet you in your environment and the place where you feel most comfortable, ultimately, I think I can get the best out of you. And I think
Yes,
for sometimes, quite often, we want to meet people in the place that we understand. We need to understand where people come from and what suits them best. So I often say to people the same way I said in my TEDx talk, take a man to the places he feels most comfortable, and he will quite often open up, whether it's he's watching a football match or he might be, I don't know, reading, playing football, whatever it might be. You will get the most out of us as men. But I think especially when it comes to women, women open up their emotions a lot easier than men do. Women have greater support circles. They've got other people who are willing to listen to them. And I think once we can adapt the feminine and the masculine and use that harmoniously, we will be able to get more people in general to speak up about mental health. And I think one of the important topics within mental health is, yes, we can talk about mental health, but we've also got to talk about resilience. The world is a tough place. And
yes,
I think there was also another great saying I read in a book called I can't remember. It's called The Righteous Mind, why politics and religion divide good people. And it was saying, prepare the child for the road, not the road for the child. So quite often, I think in society, we're trying to even out society to a place where we forget there's a struggle. And I'm not saying we need to desire struggle in any way, shape, or form. But I think once we get people to realize that life is tough, you can't choose what happens to you, but you can always choose what happens when you get back up. And that's ultimately the message I try to give. But my answer would be, take people to where they are most comfortable, not where you are most comfortable. If you want
yes.
people to open up, facilitate it, allow them the freedom and the space to communicate their feelings, how they like to demonstrate it best.
That is a fantastic answer. And I know there's a lot of men. I mean, You know, I like to call myself a local boy. I know my father's always saying, stop saying that. Uh, but by that, what I mean is that I'm very in touch with the people that I grew up with. You know, I talk the way I talk
Mhm.
in a particular environment. When I move out of that environment, my language changes. And so I feel it's good for me to have that balance. And I know for myself that looking at it now, when I look back, there was, forgive the pun, bare man that was holding stuff inside. And I've lost a few guys to suicide, a few of my close friends to suicide. And this is what I'm trying to say. No one ever thought about this. No one has ever thought about speaking up as men. Because we are talking about the men here, and that, part two will be the women, which will be next week, which will coincide with Mother's Day. Um, it's not a thing that men do. And again, I say it's not just black, it's not just white, it's just men in general. We just don't know how to open up. And I feel you coming on tonight and sharing intimate stories, we're learning from you. And I think guys older than you, even guys younger than you, Manny, a young man, one of our young guns who's operating tonight, he's a young man. And I feel it's imperative that men open up. Another question I have, Sean, is, I mean, you spoke about right environments, but are men right to think that opening up about mental health struggles at work could affect their career prospects due to male stereotypes?
Absolutely. And again, that is a very valid question. Ultimately, a lot of the stereotypes when it comes to men is, we have to be self-reliant, the powerful loner, we've got to earn money, we must be providers. That's where our value comes from. And I think a lot of men, when they become worried and anxious that they can't do that, they're not going to speak to their work bosses because they believe that their work bosses will see them as a liability. And I think when we have this profit model, especially within businesses, we don't realize the damage that we're doing to humans. Ultimately, if you can meet humans in a place where they can operate very well functionally within their job, and you can also meet them in a place where their mental health is able to meet the demands, you harmoniously get to a place where you marry the two and you create better outcomes. And a great example of that was, for example, the 4-day working week, where we saw production went up. People reported better mental health. We know we are overworked and
Yes,
underappreciated in society, especially as humans, but especially as men. I
and
think a
underpaid.
great
Sorry, and
example.
underpaid.
Absolutely. Whatever you believe your value for money is obviously down to you, and that's down to capitalism. But you know, another good example I would say has been femininity as a concept, as we understand, is we earn femininity from a woman. A woman is not eternally feminine. She's feminine for the right guy who unlocks that within her. Whereas with men, we must be eternally masculine at all times. Our
Come on.
masculinity can take no days off. Our masculinity has to ultimately always be there, ready to go, regardless what we feel. Now, whether or not you believe that's a good thing or a bad thing is up for debate. But I believe ultimately this answer or this idea that we always have to be one thing is ultimately very destructive thinking, because when you fall from grace, you feel like you're no longer a man. And it doesn't make you any less of a man to speak about your struggles, to speak about your issues. If anything, a story shared is a burden half. And you
Yes,
speaking your story gives the power to somebody else to tell their own. And that's something that I really try to do. But I want to touch on something else that you said. I think men open up, but we open up in our own ways and we express emotions differently. So
yes.
whereas a woman might sit down and cry, a guy might go to the boxing ring and express it through anger. He might go and fight
Mm,
somebody. A guy might go to the pub and drink. He might use escape mechanisms. And there's a reason, again, why men are more likely to be homeless. Men are more likely to be drug addicts. Men are more likely to be alcoholic addicts. Men are always looking for ways to escape their emotions rather than to sit in it. But we do express our emotions, but sometimes it can be in very counterproductive and destructive ways that ultimately do no good for us and do no good for the society that needs us. And a strong man, and when I say strong, a strong man can be vulnerable. A strong man can take care of his family. A strong man can cry. A strong man can show happiness. A strong man can operate within duality of emotions, and it doesn't make him any less of a man. And that strong man ultimately is a benefit to society. Weak men are the ones who try to take advantage out of women. Weak men want power. A strong man knows his position in this world is to leave the world in a better place than we found it. And this is why I don't even like the conversation around masculinity, because masculinity in of itself is not toxic. Masculinity built the world around us. Masculinity invented things. Masculinity designed the tampon, for example. A man designed the tampon. He went around asking women in India, what could he do to help them on their periods? He designed the tampon. A man looks for things that he can help solve in the world. And I think what people don't realize is there's different types of masculinity. I wouldn't say, for example, I'm hyper masculine in the sense of I'm 6'3", right? But I wouldn't say I'm very physically imposing. I would say I'm a bit more nerdy, but it's not a bad thing. That's my masculinity. I enjoy that. I enjoy that part of me. And I think a lot of men are forced to be somebody that they are not by the people around them, by the women that they quite often like, and by their peer groups. I grew up in the hood. I know I sound middle class to most people, and it's funny
Yeah.
because
Come on.
do you know what it is? I sound middle class because my mum made me read a lot, but I grew up in the hood. My mum's a single parent. I went to a state school. I was on free school meals. Most of the boys I went to school with are in pen. A lot of them are dead. A lot of them went to jail for drugs. This is no joke. A lot of the boys that I grew up with, they've got survivor's guilt as well. One of my boys was talking about survivor's guilt, how he's the one that survived everything that's happened, but most of his boys are dead, or they're in jail. We need to celebrate the different types of masculinity and not
Yes.
proclaim that there's one type. For example, Anthony Yard, I look up to him. He's a boxer. That's one type of masculinity. He's athletic. That's another type. But there's other types of men out there who have just the same value, just the same social status and cultural capital that we need. And this is why what I can't stand when it comes to the media is we show only one way to be, and that's through rap, music, and sports. We need to show that there's other sides that men are allowed to be. So masculinity in of itself is not the issue. It is us expecting there to be one type of hegemonic masculinity rather than celebrating the different types of masculinity.
And I'm telling you, Kane Creary says he's learning so much about himself and men as a whole from this. Big up the both of you. Big up Kane. And I'm sitting here, bruv, I'm just downloading data, fam. As they say. I'm downloading the data because I'm telling you what you are giving us here today. There could be one person on this live. It really doesn't matter because once it's out there on YouTube, it's there for anyone to go back and watch and listen to. But the way you're saying this in quote unquote layman's terms. But another thing I wanted to ask, because for those listeners who are like managers or leaders, can you give them like some guidance on what they can do to help someone that's perhaps struggling, possibly with mental health? What type of approach should they take?
I think the first thing is
I say that because I'm a manager. A lot of people look up to me, and I felt I've always done a great job. Like, but I'm always looking to learn. I think that's the thing. I call myself like a student teacher, and you're teaching me, and I want to learn more. And that's why I'm saying, what can managers and leaders do to help those that probably they manage who is struggling with mental health? And the men,
I would say, in my opinion, from what I understand about leadership, look into the different types of leadership. There's empathetic leadership, there's service leadership, there's, ethical leadership. Look and see which type of leadership style you resonate with the most. So, for example, I realized within myself just how much I value empathetic leadership, but I've struggled in the past with it because the culture I grew up in, bruv, we don't talk about none of them emotions. But when I was around my best friend, when I was around my best friend Malcolm, who taught me that there's other ways to be a man, and my best friend Malcolm has inspired me beyond measure. I can never give him enough credit. Look at your leadership style. Understand your personality type. look at those flaws, journal within yourself, do a lot of self-reflective behavior. And I believe in turn, the more you work on yourself, the better you can connect with other people out there. Now, that might be a very long-term solution, but I'd say in the short term, remind people they are valid, their feelings are justified, and you, most importantly, hear them. You may not be able to resonate with everything that they say, but you're going to try and do your best to understand them. And I think humans, we are social animals. We need to be understood. No matter if you're introverted or extroverted or you're an ambivert, whatever you may be, you can honestly give people a chance to tell their story. Give somebody the chance to tell their story and they'll tell you about their lifetime. Because most of the time we don't give enough people a voice. We have people in the media, as you said, like on shows such as Love Island and so on, who get too much airtime, but we don't give other people with real stories a chance to tell what's going on. And I would say also give somebody the chance, even if it's not there and then to tell you what's going on, let them present information in another way, whether it's a anonymous letterbox, whether it's they can come and order a time in to come and have a chat with you. If you value the people you work with, and ultimately if you are a leader who is of service, because if people forget, being a leader and being a manager means you are of service to people. You're not with it there for your, obviously you've got your interests, but ultimately you believe in doing the best by other people because you believe that they have the best in them. And I believe when you're able to do that, you can bring more out of other people. And this is how I think we should operate in society. And I'm not perfect. I'm still guilty within my own self-interest and within a lot of things that I do. But being on my life coach course and doing a lot of the inner work, I'm learning so much more. So look at your leadership style. Figure out the way you operate as a leader. Look at your flaws, your strengths. Study and analyze your team around you. See how people communicate. Understand the ways in which they work best. And see what you can do to get them to a place where they are going to open up. And it can be a slow road, but slow roads are better when you take your time rather than building a road fast and eventually it will crumble.
1 second, because I want to say we have Spencer Fearon, who is probably one of my closest friends, if not the closest. And we was talking about this, and he sometimes I'm like, Spence, come on, man. But we're live on the show. Don't be, you understand? And I realize now, even listening to you, how important it is for my brother to get things off his chest live. I never, me and Spencer, we talk with each other, and Spencer has openly said that how I've been there for him as others. But we share a different kind of relationship because we're work buddies as well. And when he comes on it, I was telling someone today in the car that people like, bruv, how comes you're so, you're always smiling and everything like that, and you don't seem to. I'm like, bro, it's not even that. With me, I'm like, if anyone says anything to upset me, I just let it out. Like, so if you're my friend, you gotta get all pieces of me. You gotta get when I'm sad. You gotta get the angry me when you've said something to upset me, because I don't want nothing to affect me. And I feel that that's where this balance has come within me by letting it out. And I can see now what Spencer is doing based on what you're saying this evening. Some alarming figures that I read, that mental health, recent studies have shown that men are less likely than women to access services for mental health disorders such as depression and anxiety, and they account for 3/4 of deaths from suicide. And it is because of this not opening up, men being afraid to talk. But another thing I heard you say is about the elephant and the male, what elephants and males have in common. And I want you to touch on that. Because when I heard that analogy, I said, the people need to hear it. Talk time. So please touch on the elephant and the male's analogy for us, Sean.
Yeah, so there's an elephant in the room, which there's an African saying, African proverb, again, that says, those who deny the elephant in the room are doomed to carry its weight. And I'm not sure if people understand what that means, but when you deny something is there, you will carry the weight of it, because denial means that you know there is something there. Now, with elephants in a herd, when there is no male role model, or the father is not there for the male elephants, they act up. They don't know what to do. They don't know how to guide themselves, and they don't know ultimately how to conduct themselves. And this is very much in common with what happens with a lot of men. Funnily enough, growing up without a father, as I told you, I never realized how much it profoundly had an effect on my existence until when men would tell me things, I didn't want to hear it because I wasn't used to having a male father figure in my life tell me what to do. I felt as if I couldn't listen to anybody else. I couldn't take constructive criticism. I'll be like, how dare you? You're not my father. But if I had a father around, I probably would have had a very different response at the time. And I'm in a very different place now, luckily enough. And I learn from my male role models all around me. I learn from my male friends. And therapists, funnily enough, do not understand male depression. They don't understand male depression and anxiety because it's a recent phenomenon in the sense of, because men are no longer knowing their place in the world, because there's so many different changes in society, we're not giving men a chance to adapt within society and to keep up. Now, with elephants, very similarly, we know how powerful elephants are. Really and truly, lions are not king of the jungles. Elephants technically would be classed as king of the jungles because they have amazing memory, they're the biggest, and they can trample a lion, really and truly. And when we look at society now, we look at the increasing rates of single motherhood, and we look at the increasing rates of young boys growing up without fathers. Single parents single-handedly raise boys, and this is not to blame anyone in any way, shape, or form. I am a product of a single mother, and my mum did a fantastic job. I can never blame my mum, but there were things she could not do. Growing up as a boy without a father, you are highly predicted and more likely to end up in jail. You're more likely to end up jobless, homeless, to be suffering from mental health issues. And it's because fathers are such a core, important part of a child's life. And I don't think I need to be, and I was going to say, I don't think I need to be left wing or right wing to admit that. Left wing and right wing are both sides of the same bird. Whether or not you're Democratic or Republic, we're both trying to get to some sort of progress. And these are the honest conversations that we need to have. We don't have enough of these conversations because people are sensitive, and understandably, a lot of mums feel like they're being attacked when someone goes, you need a father around, whether it's their role model. But I know there's also a lot of young men out there that when they have kids, because they didn't know how to be fathers, or they didn't have fathers around them, that they don't know how to raise a boy. And when they are presented with the opportunities to be a father, it can terrify them and it can scare them. And yes, we shouldn't make excuses. Yes, we shouldn't validate men being absent. But I think with a deeper sense of understanding and empathy and compassion, we can give these men the space in order to be able to move into their very important roles. And even if you look in prisons, I've worked in prisons, what is the key indicator for a lot of these boys? Single fathers. Well, they come from single parent households, no fathers, poverty, socio-economic factors, trying to be the provider, the people around them, the gangs were the family that they needed. Family is what kids need. And I don't know how more to tell this to people. And once upon a time ago, when we look at, I don't want to give too much of a history lesson to bore people, but when we look at the introduction of the nation state, what the nation state did was it took fathers away from the home, then it took mothers away from the home. Parents had to start paying for childminders, which meant they spent a lot less time with their children, which meant they had a lot less of effect on the children's lives. Children now spend more time in schools than they do with their parents. Schools have a greater effect on children than parents. Their wider circles, the consumption of social media, the ascent of smartphones, the breakdown of the nuclear family, the destruction of youth clubs, all these different things should tell us just how important the family is. But there's one more thing I really want to say. Once upon a time ago, people were allowed to hold children accountable without anybody stepping in and without people realizing that And with people realizing that your neighbors, your family, your friends had good intentions for your children, now nobody dares to say anything because we're so protective about our parenting, we don't allow any sort of criticism. So it's a multi-layered, multifaceted answer as to why this is happening. But family, and family isn't just immediate family, it's the environment in which you carve and create a family. Like your boxing's a family. Lions in the camp, that tells you that that's a family. It's
Yes,
it's a
sir.
full of family. And this is what I'm trying to tell people, that young boys look for every way possible to find family because it's a struggle for them quite often to get it in their immediate circles.
Since 1981, suicide rates for women have halved, whereas men, it's only gone down by 20%. Men do not speak about their problems.
Yeah.
Why would you say that the rate has halved with women, but yet it's only gone down slightly with men?
There's a lot of social, political answers. And I think what feminism was able to do, which is exactly what it needed to do, was it gave women the freedom. It gave them the autonomy. When you look at the sexual revolution, so women had the ability to be able to take the pill, which meant they were able to control their sexual reproductive rights. They were no longer burdened, quote unquote, with the fact that they had to have children at a certain time. They could delay the time they had children. They could have careers. It gave women a chance and an autonomy that they didn't have in the past. And with that freedom, they were able to explore their humanity a lot more. Whereas I do think in the past, yes, there's some elements where they were confined to just domestic roles, which wasn't always good for some women. Some women really enjoy domestic roles and other women want to have careers. And we've got to give people the freedom, and feminism is the choice to be able to have both, or equality and so much more. So freedom and autonomy, I think, gave women exactly what they needed, which meant they could explore the assets of their full capabilities within society, right? But when we
Yes.
look at men, we look at what happened, right? Once upon a time ago, one salary could take care of children in the household. And men, you probably notice yourself, Tunde, right? That men love to provide. As a
Yes.
man, I know if I love my friends and my family, I love to give. Naturally, men, we share our resources. So when some women will go, men are stingy, men aren't stingy. We just don't want to hand out our resources willy-nilly. We were
Come
raised
on.
to be gentlemen, not simps. And that's a clear distinction. We were raised to be gentlemen, not simps. We have to have our boundaries. We have to have our standards and our morals and our values. Now, also, what happened with men was because of what happened with feminism, that, as I said previously, the pendulum swung too far one way. And whilst we were able to give women their freedom, we kicked men out to the curb. We made them forget what their place was in the world. We were able to reinvent socially, politically what happened with women, but we haven't done the same for men. And let me give you an example, right? If we want men to have a chance to exist in society, we need to encourage men to be teachers, because teaching is a female-dominated profession. The mental health services, therapists, 80% of therapists are women and 20% are men, because yes, in some essences, the gender and sex differences may have a part to play. We know that quite often on average. So when I mean average, this is a generalization. You can take it to whatever specific what you want, but this is a generalization that men are interested in things, women are interested in people. But there's a lot of men who aren't like that. And I think a lot of men who are interested in people and things are shunned for it. They're not allowed to express that because society has a certain idea and a narrative of where they should be. So I think there's social, there's political factors, there's so many different things that happen as to why suicide has gone up for men. And technically, it's decreased massively for women. We need to get that social, political seesaw as close to even as we possibly can, while we give the women the freedom and the autonomy to express their full desires and the pursuits of their life, but also giving men the freedom to understand their purpose and their place within this world. And it's through these conversations that happens, through workshops, through I just think ultimately allowing men to see their purpose is beyond what they produce in this world. Our value is way more than what we give to the world. We have inherent value because we are needed and wanted by society. But I don't want to bore your audience too much, but there's so many
You're
reasons.
definitely
But
not boring us.
I tried to give the most simple answer I can. It's such a multivariate and multi-layered answer.
Yes. I read a comment earlier. I don't know where it particularly was, but it was talking about the reason why women do better is because they have groups. Men should set up more
Mhm.
groups in order for them to come out and speak. And it's something that me and you was talking about before we came on air, that we are looking to build on our relationship. So any TV companies, radio stations, you have to come and check me first, and then you will get to Sean.
Mm.
Because we're going to take this to the next level. What do you feel about men socializing together? Do you think that it will have an impact if men got together regularly, not just as, yeah, come, let's go out and rave, let's go out down, like actually speak? I think,
Mm.
in the past, I think that men are so used to saying, oh, all women do is chat, that we're seeing now that I think that we should have clocked onto what they were doing, because it would have made us a
Yeah.
bit more balanced. What do you think about that?
Funnily enough, right? I think as men we do socialize a lot. Now let me give you an example that is probably going to make you think about things differently. When you go to the boxing gym or you go to a gym, man them talk to each other. We may not talk to each other in the ways that women talk, but some of the guys will be like, how's life going? Hey, big man, what are you doing? How's it going? What are you up to? We have
Yeah.
conversations that can be at very surface level, but usually it can go on to build a deeper sense of a relationship. And I think quite often you're right that men, where it's this idea, bruv, I don't want to chat about my feelings, bro. I've got shit to do, man. I ain't got time to be focusing on what's going on. And I hear that because I've been like that before. And from my relationship with my good friend Malcolm, when one time he cried to me and he said, bro, you're just so harsh on me, man. He said, you don't ever show me you love me. I said, I know. He said, I know you love me, but there's times I just need to hear it. And it made me cry because I was like, bro, I'm so sorry. I said, the way I was raised, positive affirmations wasn't a thing. I just had to get on with it. And I've
Come
had
on.
to learn to be more positively affirming. But that's because I had a friend who was patient, understanding, kind, and ultimately understood who I was as a person. Now I'm going to give you another example. Yes, women do love to chat. Women love to take a branch and make it into a tree, or take a seed and make it into a tree and build a forest full of trees. We think of the Receipts podcast, where really and truly all they do is gossip, right? And female chat shows have been accepted as something very important in society. But can you imagine a chat show where all men sit down and do is talk about their problems and issues? I've openly heard, I went to a shop once, right? And one woman said to me, oh, I hope you're not an Andrew Tate fan. And I said, well, what's the issue if I am or if I'm not? She said, well, because all men do is sit around the podcast and complain. And I asked her, what's the difference between that and the Receipts podcast and women talking about and just complaining about men? She said, nothing. But I said, but women are allowed to complain. You're allowed to rant and rave and talk about the things you don't like. But men are not taught to be like that. And I asked her, would you raise your son to be like that? She said, no. I said, so why do you want somebody else's son to be like that? So I think we need a chat show where men can just talk about their problems, talk about the things that they're struggling with. And it was an idea I, funny enough, wanted to pitch to some TV stations at some point, but you and I can probably have a better conversation where we get men in a room and we just talk. We talk about our worries. We talk about our struggles. And I think that there will be a revolutionary agent. And let me explain why. Your brain is a creature of volume and repetition.
Yes, sir.
Right? Humans are habitual. You get better at something by practicing it over and over and over again. Now imagine that young boy on TV, the young boy at home, who before he goes to school, he watches a show with 8 men speaking about their issues. He could be inspired to go to school and inspire his other 8 friends to speak about their issues. This is obviously in a fantastical world, because girls will go to school and talk about it. Girls talk about loose women. They talk about podcasts. They speak about chat shows. Now imagine the power we could have if we had a chat show for men and for young boys, where we look at fathers. It has to happen. But I believe that ultimately, because we live in such a profit-driven society, it would have to be profitable for people to want to listen to it. So people have to put their money where their mouth is and invest in a show like that and promote it and watch it the same way we do it for Chris Brown's concert. We buy tickets for Beyonce's Renaissance tour and so much more. Put your money where your mouth is, because money speaks louder than anything else, and we can make it happen.
Sean, this has been a revelation, and as I said, we will be speaking a lot after this broadcast. We've hit the hour on the mark. This has been such a powerful discussion, and I know before I let you go, I just want to hear or see if there's any questions from the panel, the people watching and listening live on YouTube. Sean's right there in front of us. It will not be the last time you hear him, because you may be seeing him more around the team and the Stamina for Soul platform. As I said, I told you before he came on, I've not seen a person articulate themselves about this particular matter. I mean, you can go into different subjects, but this whole thing about men not speaking up and just locking their thoughts and their emotions inside until it's too late. We can't allow this to continue, because so many people are dying of suicide. 75% of suicide are men, and we spoke about it earlier, which will be going into the women. The number may be smaller from women, but I feel the detriment is even greater, because if a woman is suffering in silence, a nation is suffering in silence. So,
absolutely,
but we're dealing with the men this evening. And it's been incredible having you on today. I know Spencer has listened to every word of this, because Spencer has no. It's not that show tonight, mate. Medicine Society. We ain't talking about boxing. This is more important than boxing. I'm admittedly, this is more important than boxing, because boxing is a sport. May not appear like a sport to some, but it's a sport. But this is real life issues that everyone is affected by. Everybody has some mental issue, whether it be big or small. If it's big, it's big. If it's small, it can turn out to be big if you let it fester. So, good music 210. Manny, put that comment up, please. If Manny hasn't gone to sleep. Manny, put good music 210 up, please. Thank you. Sean, what are the best techniques to help yourself and improve yourself? Journaling is decent, but anything else?
Yeah, so with journaling, it gives you the opportunity to reflect, to look at your day, to critically analyze yourself. But I think gratitude journal is important. It's very easy for us to spot the negatives within our world, but when you notice the positives, you take yourself out of a scarcity mindset and put yourself into an abundance mindset. And you practice something in CBT, which is known as brain dumping. You take the thoughts out of your head, you put it onto paper. But I would say, do the things that scare you the most. Now, if you don't do the things that scare you the most, you're only operating within your comfort zone, right? And we hear this all the time, but you need to take those stepping stones to your learning zone. Your learning zone is the unknown. And within that unknown, what happens ultimately is you don't know what's going to happen. This is where you're going to probably flourish the most. So I'd say do the things that scare you the most. Dedicate yourself to something that you know will improve you as a person and as a human being, and ultimately understand your purpose in this role, in this world. Your purpose doesn't have to be this one defined thing. It can be a multitude full of things. Your purpose could be something as simple as, I'm going to be a better son to my mum. It could be something as simple as that. Set yourself up with small goals as well. Small goals are good for dopamine hits. You tick them off when you've reached all your small goals, and you keep moving towards that. And essentially what you're doing is you're creating a checklist for your life, and you're teaching yourself that you can achieve things. So those are things that I think really help. Goals, journaling, exercise. You can never really go wrong with exercise, even if you don't like it. Find something that you really enjoy, because we know what exercise does for the brain. Having a good friendship circle around you is going to be very, very important. Find people around you who really want to listen to you and to understand you, and they want to encourage you to be the best version of yourself. Don't have yes people around you. Have people that will challenge you, and they will hold you accountable and responsible. And those are the kind of friends that I have around me. If I had all yes people, I wouldn't be where I am now. But I'd also say you could do something that you've always wanted to do. Those things you've always wanted to do that you've never had the bravery to do, go and work on taking the small steps to build yourself up to do it. And I think though that's the best thing I would also say. Therapy is also going to be really good. Therapy or counseling. Give yourself a chance to speak to a trained professional as well, because I'm training to become a therapist later on at some point as well. But I think therapy will really help you to dig into who you are as a person, and to really, it forces you to improve. So that's some of the advice I would actually give.
Fantastic. Leah O, she says, question, sharing our deepest thoughts ultimately makes us vulnerable. How do we discern who to share this information with? Brilliant question.
This is a very, very good question. And what I learned to realize how to discern who I share my thoughts with was by the people around me. If I could share my thoughts with them, and people are allowed to have judgments, judgment's a human thing, but those who sought to understand me a little bit more and wanted to dig deeper into why I was thinking the way that I was thinking, or what was happening within me, those are the people that I was able to discern who I really could share my thoughts with. But there's another thing that I did realize, that your truth is your truth, right? What you believe is ultimately what cultivates your reality. Now, with the story I speak about, people judge me, but my mentality is people are going to judge me regardless. I might as well give them the truth, and they can go and make their own truth around it. So find people you can share it with. So watch their reactions very carefully. Notice if you're also acting from a place of anxiety and worry, and look at how people react. It is such an important thing, because sometimes we think nobody wants to listen to us and we have no one around us to be vulnerable. But I can promise you, like what Paddy Pimblett says, he'd rather have a friend cry on his shoulder than have to attend his friend's funeral. And I think a lot of people who love you and truly care about you, they're going to want to hear what's really going on within you.
Yes, sir. Another question for us, people. Miss Ringside, you're always late to the party. I don't know what you're doing, but you're always late. We need another question because I need another question from the audience before I let Sean go, because I can't say you're not going to see him again, because that would just be lying. But I would like another question from the audience. What area did you grow up in, Sean?
So I grew up in Southwest London, Tooting. Went to school in Tooting. Did my undergraduate at Roehampton. Did my master's at Goldsmiths. So I grew up in Southwest London. I've pretty much been here for most of my whole life, man. I'm looking to go to the Caribbean at some point. I've got some work to do out there that I would like to do. So my background is heavily the inner city black boy's journey,
Yes. Well, maybe our audience is shy this evening because I think you've silenced everybody. Like, everybody's still thinking about many of the things you've said this evening. But again, let me go back to a few stats I have here. I spoke about, yes, there was one point I can't leave you. I think it's a great way to finish, because in your TED interview or your speech where you gave, you spoke about losing your father and how every time you think about your father you well up. But I think it's a great way to finish, because next week's lecture will be on the women. Now, in that speech, you spoke about the impact and the pact that the 4 women had on your life, and I want you to tell the audience about these powerful women who shaped and molded you, please.
Yeah, fantastic. So the four women that helped to raise me after my dad died, they promised to take care of me when my father died, and they supported my mum in everything that she did, and they really were there for me. They were massive role models in my life. So my auntie Mel, my auntie Mackie, and my auntie Lorraine, alongside my mum, they promised to take care of me, and that's what they did. Having a strong village of matriarchs around me to support me, to hold my mum accountable, to give me a different perspective, to give me opportunities to travel away from home. They were a fundamental part of growing up, how I was able to view the world differently, from emotional intelligence, emotional resilience, emotion, empathy, all these things that they taught me. And listening to their experiences of the world really gave me a different insight into what was happening in my own immediate circle. So my mum
Yeah.
is a lot older. My mum had me at 44 years old, so she's 72 now, and we're worlds apart. And my mum's a very different type of person compared to each one of my aunties. So having their differing insights and perspectives on the world, I think, gave me a more well-rounded view, and made me very, very much more critical of the world around me growing up, because funnily enough, they were all nurses. So, very
Yeah.
Caribbean thing, Windrush, they were all nurses, and having them around was just a powerful testament to the promise that they made. But it was also very powerful for me growing up to know I had women who loved me unconditionally, women who supported me, and women who kept their promise to my father. And seeing the work that they did has ultimately informed a lot of the work of a lot of the work I do now.
Fantastic. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm gonna let I'm reading some quotes, um because I'm just tongue tied, to be honest with you. And I think the audience tonight and the way you've been able to hold the crowd, it speaks volumes, Sean. Let's let the people know where they can get your information. Obviously, say it out, even though it's there written. Say it out. Where you can be, where people can hear bits about you.
So yeah, you can find me on all social media at the Sean Flores. It's on my little bio that's been there throughout the chat. You can find me as Sean Flores all over the internet. I'm going to be delivering another TEDx talk actually at Imperial College London. So you've got a little bit of juicy first time access to knowing that Tunde. I'm going to be speaking about psychedelics and the potential treatments and how it's going to bring forth a mental health revolution. So that's something really exciting for us to look at and to probably speak about another time. But find me on all social media at the Sean Flores on every single platform.
Ladies and gentlemen,
Thank you, man.
it has been an absolute pleasure. And as you would always expect with us, questions start coming flying in when you're just about to go.
Well, listen,
You know,
I've got time to answer some of the questions if you need me to, man. I'm more than happy to give my time to people.
Well, I mean, listen. Let's just take one from Dotty Gal, because Dotty Gal is always backing us on everything. And I love the name. The name just, even the way that is just Dotty Gal. You can put a little Jamaican swag in it, a little Cockney swag. Dotty Girl, anything. But she says, "What books would Sean recommend? Thanks again for spending this time with us."
Yeah, no,
Any book?
thank you for listening.
Yes.
Thank you for listening. I would say I would recommend a lot of books by Bell Hooks. She's a critical feminist author, and she's not like the typical feminist in the sense of with man-hating tactics and so much more. But I would say she looks at the unity between the black male and the black female and seeks to heal it. And a lot of her work all about love, rock my soul. Just type in Bell Hooks, and there's a great book called Men Will to Change, Masculinity. There's a lot of different books by Bell Hooks I'd highly recommend. So it's
Bell
simple,
Hooks.
Bell Hooks, that's her name. Also, there's a great book called My Grandmother's Hands, which talks about racialized trauma. That's something else I'd highly recommend. Another really good book that I have really been enjoying, actually. Let me find it on my Audible. It's positive psychology that I'm reading at the moment, which is Choose the Life You Want. 101 ways to create your own road to happiness. That's another really good book. So yeah. Someone just said, are you familiar with the work of Professor Julian Leff and his work on
Yeah, I'm gonna
cultural
put it up.
psychiatry?
Are you
I'm
familiar with
actually
the work
not.
of
I'm familiar with that. I'm typing it in right now because I'm going to take a look at that and study
well,
that.
Bernard Cordier? Thank you for the £10. And again, I will read it up because that's what the Snapchats is about, or super chats. Are you familiar with the work of Professor Julian Left and his work on cultural psychiatry? Recently produced a documentary and feature film, and would love to connect. Big up Tunde. Yes, definitely we're going to be connecting. There's no doubt about that. Bell hooks, some money, because obviously you're new to the thing. When sometimes these authors are coming up, or names are coming up, just type them up on the screen and put them up. But Dotty Girl's got it. So yeah, Snapchats. We call it Snapchat. It's not super chats. But yeah, so again, I think we've got your details, Sean. We've got, we know you're going to be back on the show. We know that yourself and me are going to be doing some big things together, and we've got that
Absolutely.
plan. And I just thank you again for everything that you've shared with us this evening. And as I know my brother Spencer Fearon will be there phoning me after this show saying we need to link up with this brother. That will be his exact words. We need to link up with this brother, and but he don't know we're one step ahead of him, Sean. We're one step ahead of him.
Listen,
But
I'm grateful and honored that you gave me a chance to be on this platform. And as I said, my DMs are open. I'm more than happy to make time to listen to anybody. Just drop me a message on Instagram. I use the most. You can email me, LinkedIn, whatever. And just to people to know that you're not alone. You may feel alone, but you are never alone. And your struggle is worth someone listening to. And if I've helped one person here today, then my work is done. If I can help more people, then even more fantastic. So thank you so much, Tunde. And I'm looking forward to seeing what we create.
yes, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, the one, the only Sean Flores. Catch him on all social media, all social platforms. And thank you for being with us, sir.
Thank you so much, Tunde. We'll speak soon.
Good night. God bless.
All right. Night.
We done it again. We done it again. We done it again. That's what that's all that needs to be said this evening. We went over time. It's always an hour. We want to keep it professional and be an hour, but it was fantastic, people. And I think that there were so many gems dropped tonight that this is actually going to be an episode which you go and play and replay and share with. Yeah, it was one of them we episodes. Old tight Joe Barrow. It was one of those episodes, and I'm definitely going to go and rewatch this and listen to how this brother articulated things and how the message that he spread tonight, because men are suffering. Men are suffering, and there was something on my Instagram tonight earlier on about, there's man out here, man are suffering, but there's man out here that's winning. And I'm like, bro, this is what you see. They appear that they're winning, but you don't know there's many that are showing this side of it. We showed that picture where Sean there was one side he was grieving about his father, and there was another side where he was doing a photo shoot. And basically he's saying there's two sides to a coin. So don't always think when you see people on TV, on social and everything, that everything is all rosy. There's many of us that don't have that opportunity to show another side, and they're struggling. They're struggling, and I say it so passionately because when I look back in my own life with friends that I grew up with who today are in bits, I'm like, so that's what it was. Like, you were going through things, and I've never been a judgmental person. I just don't do that. It's just not in my nature. I think that's the way I was going. But you're around people that talk about others, and you're like, there's a root to this. Like, they never just woke up and pretended that they or just acted like there's something underlining that they're going through that they're not showing. So if anything, the message tonight is like, you know, guys, brothers, whatever you want to call them, the man them, you know, speak. Let's get these little groups together and talk about your problems. Let's follow, take the women's lead. And it's like I say that women's lead, but it's not every woman, because a lot of women that are holding stuff inside as well, who we're going to touch on as well. And we're going to hopefully get a woman guest on that can speak and articulate themselves as well as Sean did. We're looking to do that next week. So anybody that feels they can speak on this subject of women, you know, suffering in silence and how it's affecting them or how it has affected them, please let us know. Because as Leah O says, everybody has a story, and that's facts. Everybody has a story. And I'm going to end the show this evening with some short, smooth, as my dad said, smooth words by the great Mother Teresa, the great Mother Teresa. She said, and in ending, she said, spread love everywhere you go. Let no one ever come to you without leaving happier. Mother Teresa, rest in paradise. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you again for joining us on another magnificent, eye-opening, inspirational, motivational, food for thought discussion. Talk time with Tunde. Am I my brother's keeper? Are men suffering in silence? Go out there, have a great week. Share the broadcast. Enlighten someone else. Let someone hear the magnificent words of Sean Flores, other than yourself. Don't keep this podcast tonight to yourself. Let's spread the word. Ladies and gentlemen, good night. God bless. Everything is timing, and it's talk time with Tunde. See you next week.